All right, joining us now is Dr. Ron Peterson with the Mayo Clinic Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Doctor, let's start with talking about this new drug. How significant are the results of this trial?
Well, I think this is important, Tim. This is the third drug now that has been demonstrated to remove one of the proteins in the brain that cause Alzheimer's disease, namely the amyloid protein, and produce a clinical benefit. So I think that's very significant.
And what does Donanemab actually do?
So Donanemab is an antibody that goes into the bloodstream, circulates into the brain, grabs onto that protein called amyloid, and removes some of it from the brain. And amyloid is one of the proteins that actually causes the damage in the brain.
Now, what does the trial study show?
Well, this study followed 1,800 patients for about 18 months. And those who received the antibody actually showed a slowing of the clinical progression of the disease over that time frame. So this is an important disease-modifying effect of the drug that we had not seen prior to the last few years.
Now, from a clinical point of view, you now have several new drugs that are giving neurologists basically more tools in their bag to try and treat Alzheimer's with. Is that the significance of this?
Very much so. So there are now 3 drugs that have been demonstrated to remove some of this amyloid protein from the brain and slow the clinical progression of the disease. We haven't had that prior to this, so this is very important for our patients.
Now, we need to talk about potential side effects because there are some significant side effects to these drugs, aren't there?
Yes, this class of drugs can cause some swelling and some bleeding in the brain. Usually these are quite small areas and mostly they're asymptomatic, but occasionally they can expand and cause serious problems.
Now, for disclosure purposes, Doctor, I have to ask, did you participate in this latest Lilly trial for Donanemab?
I have consulted for Eli Lilly in the past, but I was not involved in the design or the execution or the analysis of the data from this study.
What's the next step typically? This is the phase 3 trial that just concluded. How soon do you anticipate perhaps FDA approval?
Well, I suspect that the company will apply for FDA approval immediately and hopefully will get some decision by the end of the year, meaning that it might be available then for our patients perhaps as soon as early next year.
Doctor, with all of these drugs that are coming out now, there seems to be a benefit for those patients who have early onset Alzheimer's. It would seem to me then that there needs to be an emphasis now on early detection so that people can perhaps benefit from these drugs. Am I on the right path there?
Right. The drugs that have been shown to be beneficial are for early stages of the Alzheimer's disease process. So either mild cognitive impairment or the mild dementia stage of the disease. But since they are effective at this stage, one would predict that they would be even more effective if we move earlier in the disease process to try to prevent the onset of the symptoms.
Could this possibly buy patients, months, maybe years?
We've estimated that if in fact this drug works, we may be able to slow down the disease process by, say, 4.5 months over an 18-month trial or 6 months over a 24-month trial. So we're trying to keep people at their current functional level for a longer period of time.
I see. And I have to believe as a researcher that you've got to be excited about this.
Well, this is an exciting time to be involved in Alzheimer's disease research. I've been doing this for several decades, as you know, and we've had some symptomatic drugs over the years, but now we have drugs that actually have an impact on the underlying disease process itself.
Dr. Peterson, are there more drugs possibly coming down the pipeline for trials that you're excited about?
There are drugs that are targeting other aspects of the Alzheimer's disease process. So while we've been focusing on the amyloid protein, the other culprit in the disease is a protein called tau. And there are now drugs being designed to get at the tau protein as well. So I predict that in the future, we'll use combination therapy to treat Alzheimer's disease. Maybe a drug aimed at the amyloid protein, maybe another drug aimed at the tau protein. And the combination of these will provide an even greater benefit for our patients.
All right. Dr. Ronald Peterson, Mayo Clinic's director of the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Thanks so much for your time today.
All right. Thank you, Tim.